The Indian Ocean is an area of great interest for me currently in my role as the United Kingdom Maritime Component Commander, where I'm responsible for all Royal Navy ships that are deployed to the Western Indian Ocean, but also in my role as the Deputy Commander of the Combined Maritime Force, a coalition of 33 like-minded nations committed to delivering maritime security across the Western Indian Ocean region. This critical crossroads for international trade requires oversight and support to ensure that legitimate flows of goods are not undermined by maritime crimes such as piracy or by the trafficking of illicit goods. These activities harm all of our countries, and they fund destabilising terrorist activity, which must be disrupted. The UK is committed to upholding the rules-based international system by asserting the fundamental principle of freedom of navigation. So what is our challenge? Well, approximately 1/8 of the world trade passes through the Gulf of Aden annually, and that includes about 10% of UK trade in goods, around $50 billion of imports, and about $90 billion, 50 billion of exports and about $90 billion of imports, as well as about 65% of the UK's oil and natural gas supplies. However, trade flows in the Indian Ocean region are vulnerable. There are 3 choke points through which these commercial ships must transit: the Bab el-Mandeb, the Straits of Hormuz, and the Malacca Straits. And these choke points are susceptible to maritime crime and are therefore areas of concern for merchant ships under all flags. Piracy in the region around the Somali Basin and around Somalia has been reduced since its peak in 2010. But the Combined Maritime Forces view is that the threat of piracy is just one of a number of threats against the broader maritime security picture in the Indian Ocean, under the broader problem of maritime crime, which is often driven by complex sources, including regional instability. Non-state actors conduct illicit activity within the maritime domain to support violent extremist organisations for terrorist or for criminal gain. The transport of narcotics, weapons, and other illicit cargoes fund and fuel terrorism, while other activities such as mass migration and people smuggling increase the threats to the rule of law, to regional stability, and to global security. It's no secret that such problems at sea result from issues that must be resolved by people like us on the land. But we want to keep the oceans free and open, and we believe that the way to do that is on building on our contributions and our partnerships with like-minded nations. And to that end, the UK has contributed a significant amount of resource to maritime security capacity building projects in the Indian Ocean over the last number of years. However, no one country can take on this task alone, and that's why we must cooperate and build sustainable regional architectures to ensure that free flow of commerce can continue unimpeded. One of those regional architectures that already exists is the Combined Maritime Forces, for which I have the great privilege of serving as the Deputy Commander. We are an enduring global partnership made up of 33 willing nations aligned in common purpose to conduct maritime security operations in order to provide security and stability in the maritime environment. Our area of operations covers 3.2 million square miles, including the Indian Ocean, the Western Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, Somali Basin, the North Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Oman, and the Arabian Gulf, bordering on 21 states. And routinely, we see warships and aircraft from many of those CMF nations working together to deliver maritime security. Today, as we speak, warships and aircraft from the UK, the US, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Australia, France, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Italy, and Spain are at sea delivering maritime security. These nations in CMF work together to create a stabilizing effect throughout the region. The strength of CMF is its diversity. It brings together varied expertise, assets, and experience to improve maritime security throughout the region. With the recent inclusion of Brazil, CMF now has representation from every inhabited continent on the planet. And the reason we're able to bring together such a diverse range of countries is that CMF is an organization where participation is on a voluntary basis, and each nation is empowered to conduct duties in accordance with their individual capacities and their own political mandates in order to combat universally disruptive illicit maritime activity. In order to conduct those maritime security operations, CMF operates 3 combined task forces, each commanded by operational staffs from one of the CMF countries. CTF 150, the Combined Task Force 150, currently commanded by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, who took over recently from the UK and who will hand over to Canada in a few months' time, are responsible for the conduct of maritime security and counter-terrorism across the Western Indian Ocean region. Combined Task Force 151, currently commanded by Singapore, who took over recently from Japan and who will hand over to the Kuwait Navy in just a few months' time, are responsible for the conduct of counter-piracy operations in the region. And the Combined Task Force 152, currently commanded by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, who took over from Jordan and who will hand over shortly to the Kuwait Coast Guard, are responsible for maritime security and counter-terrorism within the Arabian Gulf, as well as building cooperation between those regional nations and the wider Combined Maritime Force. The activities and assets of all 3 task forces are coordinated by the Combined Maritime Force headquarters based at the US Naval Support Activity in Bahrain and commanded by a US 3-star Admiral, Vice Admiral Sterney. And that headquarters also has representation from all 33 member states in the form of liaison officers, senior national representatives, or indeed members of the headquarters who actually deliver the day-to-day operations. Our assets out at sea are ready to respond to any number of other events at sea, including humanitarian and environmental crises. But even with a coalition of this scope, we don't work in isolation. CMF achieves results by working together, pooling our resources, and actively supporting regional maritime forces patrolling their own maritime environment. We work closely with the European Union Naval Force, operating under Operation Atalanta, the counter-piracy mission. Their headquarters is currently based in the United Kingdom, alongside the highly regarded Maritime Security Centre for the Horn of Africa. But we also coordinate and deconflict our counter-piracy efforts with independent deployers, including those from India and China, in order to protect more effectively the internationally recognized transit corridor that runs through the Gulf of Aden. This broad collaboration has ensured an almost constant presence of warships suppressing piracy in the Western Indian Ocean. There have been no successful attacks this year, and the number of incidents is significantly lower than it was 5 years ago. However, we must not forget that Somali pirates retain the capability and the intent to conduct attacks on both commercial and recreational vessels. So all of those ships and boats that are transiting through that high-risk area must continue to abide by the industry guidance that's freely available. And to assist the security officers and the masters of those ships, the CMF has recently started producing an industry releasable threat assessment, which details the current situation in the Western Indian Ocean and allows a proper risk assessment to be made on any necessary security measures. And that is distributed quarterly to around about 14,000 online email addresses. So a real step forward in terms of information sharing. But it's not only piracy which CMF is tackling. In this year alone, CMF has seized more than 3 metric tons of heroin and over 40 metric tons of hashish in the Indian Ocean region. If those drugs had reached the UK, for example, the combined estimated value is in excess of £1 billion, money which would have been trafficked back to terrorists or criminals across the region. Due to the sheer size of the area over which smuggling occurs and the desire by smugglers to keep their activities secret, counter-trafficking is a very difficult assignment for a maritime force of any size. But due to CMF's unique ability to pool resource, to share information, and to coordinate responses, we've proven our ability to maximize the return of investment for participating nations. Supporting the work at sea, CMF also aims to strengthen regional nations' maritime capabilities. For example, through the development of other states' judicial systems and penal infrastructure, in order to enable an appropriate legal finish for piracy and for narcotics smuggling, which will result in prosecutions and subsequent imprisonment of those convicted. And that's key to ensuring that these networks are effectively disrupted beyond just the interdiction of a single shipment, and may help us get closer to the core of the problem. But I'm not here solely to talk to you about CMF. I also want to speak about other activities the UK is undertaking to promote a secure international maritime domain. We continue to invest in ensuring that the UK remains a key component of the regional architecture of the Indian Ocean region. The UK currently plays an active role in maritime security in the Indian Ocean region through military, multilateral, bilateral and commercial engagements and through capacity building. The Royal Navy has a permanent presence in the Indian Ocean region, with my UK Maritime Component Command headquarters based in Bahrain. And that's responsible for the Royal Navy's contribution to maritime security in the region. From there, I command, coordinate and lead the combined efforts of UK warships, aircraft and over 1,000 deployed Royal Naval personnel in the joint operating area. And as an example of the interconnected nature of our maritime environment, my area of responsibility in my UK hat stretches from the Eastern Mediterranean, through the Red Sea, through the Indian Ocean and into the Arabian Gulf, and runs as far south as Tanzania and Diego Garcia. Throughout that area, we maintain UK warships at sea 365 days a year. Furthermore, with the kind and generosity of the Kingdom of Bahrain, the UK has just this year reopened the permanent naval facility, the UK Naval Support Facility in Bahrain, which will enable us to be more agile in supporting our deployed assets and our personnel. And that will include the forward basing of a Type 23 frigate in Bahrain from spring of next year. And this, I believe, demonstrates a real commitment to the maintenance of maritime security across the region, and it greatly enhances our ability to operate across the entire region. Thanks also to our close relationship with the Sultanate, we have committed to use Duqm in Oman as a regional training and logistics hub, including for the future use of our new Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers. From these locations, we will be poised to conduct maritime security operations as we look to strengthen our partnerships and our interoperability by taking part in exercises and working alongside other regional forces. For example, we look forward to exercise Konkan later this year, our annual exercise with India. And these opportunities are ideal for ensuring that we're all at the very peak of performance, able to interoperate, able to work together to achieve our mutual aim of better maritime security throughout the region. On information sharing, the UK is a leader in establishing effective maritime domain awareness systems. The Royal Navy's United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operation has served the Western Indian Ocean well since the early 2000s and is the global model for see and avoid information, an advice service, if you will, to shipping, providing the primary point of contact for all merchant vessels, regardless of flag, in the case of piracy attacks in the Western Indian Ocean. And that's expanding as we move into that broader maritime security threats that I talked about earlier. But as an example, the service is frequently used by all Indian Ocean region flagged ships. As an example, in the 24-hour period just recently, we showed no less than 76 Indian flag ships monitoring the UK MTO organisation and taking advantage of that service that's provided. The UK has used this expertise to support other regional maritime domain awareness initiatives in the Indian Ocean region. For example, we've committed over £500,000 to support the establishment of the Regional Enforcement Centre in the Seychelles. And that brought together experts to share intelligence and information to tackle the kingpins and financiers of piracy. That centre has subsequently developed into the Regional Centre for Operational Coordination in the Seychelles, and that operates alongside its sister centre in Madagascar, the Regional Maritime Information Centre. And I'm pleased to say that UK Maritime Awareness specialists have provided support and guidance to both of those organisations on a routine basis as they're becoming operational. So to conclude, The importance of successful maritime security operations across the Indian Ocean region to permit access and the free flow of commerce will endure. Concurrently, the maritime domain will continue to be exploited to the detriment of legitimate use by criminal and terrorist actors. We need to continue to build and develop our regional architectures to counter both long-standing and indeed emerging threats. The UK and CMF will continue to work towards a situation in which the exploitation of the maritime environment by terrorists and criminal elements is reduced to a degree that is more manageable. Your security is our security, so both the UK and CMF are committed to the enduring task of conducting maritime security operations in the region, and we welcome all nations who share that common interest. Indeed, our partnerships have proven success in deterrence so far and in countering the illicit activity in our areas of operation, and I commend this model to you. Thank you.